I'm speaking to you this week from a world defined by a series of stark and frankly dangerous contrasts. We live in an age of breathtaking technological marvels, yet our most basic systems seem to be failing. An age of dire scientific warnings met with halting, inadequate political action. An age of immense accumulated wealth, overshadowed by deepening daily hardship for millions. Today, we will not look at the news as a series of random, chaotic events. Instead, we will step back and trace the interconnected patterns that are shaping our volatile present and our profoundly uncertain future. We will examine the mounting stress on our climate, the cracks appearing in our physical infrastructure, the precarious state of our global economy, the resurgence of conflict, and perhaps most critically, the escalating battle over information itself. These are not separate stories. They are the interwoven threads of a single planetary drama. And that story must begin with the foundational challenge of our time, the crisis that underpins all others, our rapidly changing climate. The climate story is one of alarming discovery and deeply disappointing inaction. For decades, the science has been clear, yet today we find ourselves staring across a widening chasm between what physics demands and what global politics is delivering. The discoveries are coming faster and are more startling than ever. In Antarctica, researchers just uncovered a hidden carbon burst, finding that winter CO2 emissions are a staggering 40% higher than we previously estimated. At the same time, new studies reveal methane emissions from landfills are also dangerously underestimated. These are not minor corrections. They are fundamental warnings that our climate models may be too optimistic. And the on-the-ground reality validates these warnings. A recent analysis found that the rapid intensification of Hurricane Melissa was 6 times more likely due to climate change, as communities in the Caribbean live with that ferocity. A new expert survey concludes that China, the world's top emitter, will not see its carbon emissions peak until closer to 2028, far later than hoped. The climate system is flashing code red, yet our political response remains paralyzed. The reason for this delay is a toxic mix of physical inertia and political inertia. Scientifically, our climate has enormous momentum. Even if we stopped all emissions today, warming would continue for decades. This reality, combined with what scientists call unknown unknowns, and like that hidden Antarctic carbon burst, makes it easy for policymakers to downplay the urgency. But the most powerful brake on action is political. As UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres bluntly warned at the recent COP30 summit, the fossil fuel industry spends billions to preserve the status quo. He said, and I quote, "Too many corporations are making record profits from climate devastation, and too many leaders remain captive to these entrenched interests." End quote. This inertia is compounded by a deep and painful divide over climate justice. At that same summit in Brazil, leaders from small island and African nations delivered emotional appeals for help. They pointed out that none of the $300 billion pledged last year by rich countries for climate damages has been delivered. This failure is not just about money. It is a fundamental breakdown of trust that stalls all global cooperation. As vulnerable nations ask for justice, not charity, the world's 1.5 degrees Celsius warming goal is now, in the words of the UN Secretary General, very likely to be breached within the next decade. So as the planet's operating system overheats, the hardware of our civilization, the concrete, steel, and circuits we depend on, is beginning to fail, and the cracks are showing everywhere. You can measure the health of a society by the state of its infrastructure. And right now, that infrastructure is telling a story of systems buckling under the combined weight of neglect, political dysfunction, and extreme weather. Consider the United States, where a partisan budget standoff and the very definition of political dysfunction left air traffic controllers unpaid, forcing the cancellation of over 4,400 flights. That is the direct, tangible cost when governance fails. In the United Kingdom, it's a story of chronic underinvestment as saturated, aging motorways like the M25 and M1 turn a patch of fog into a multi-vehicle nightmare. In India, a deadly train collision that killed at least 11 people was traced back to an apparent signal failure, a grim reminder of the safety gaps in systems that haven't kept pace with modern demands. And in Spain's Canary Islands, a freak tidal surge in Tenerife tragically swept 3 people to their deaths, a lethal preview of how our infrastructure was simply not built for the megastorms and climate stresses that are now becoming commonplace. These systems are so tightly interdependent that one failure, one understaffed control tower, or one faulty signal can trigger a cascade of disruptions across an entire society. Our physical world is operating at the edge, and this fragility mirrors the growing economic precarity felt by citizens worldwide who find their own financial foundations just as unstable. If you only look at the headline numbers, the global economy might seem resilient, but a closer look reveals a deeply paradoxical story of rising debt, persistent anxiety, and a widening chasm between the prosperous and the struggling. We are living in a K-shaped reality. A recent report from the New York Federal Reserve reveals that U.S. household debt has climbed to a record $18.6 trillion. Delinquency rates for credit cards and student loans are now at elevated levels, a clear sign of family budgets at their breaking point. At the very same time, stock markets have been hitting new highs, fueled largely by the boom in a handful of giant technology companies. This is the great divergence. Wall Street is rosy, but Main Street sentiment is gloomy, with U.S. consumer confidence near a record low. This two-track economy wasn't an accident, it was forged by policy. The vast stimulus pumped into the system during the pandemic disproportionately inflated the assets of the wealthy, while the aggressive interest rate hikes used to tame the subsequent inflation disproportionately punished the indebted. Add to this the phenomenon some call greedflation, where corporations use inflationary chaos as cover to raise prices beyond their costs, and you see how the real incomes of working families have been steadily eroded. The human cost of this uncertainty is palpable. In the United Kingdom, Christmas television ads have shifted from festive cheer to pointedly depicting families grappling with the cost of living crisis. The political cost is just as real. In Argentina, an inflationary spiral that wiped out savings led to the election of an outsider libertarian president. When economic systems leave so many feeling unheard and left behind, it is no surprise that citizens often decide to take matters into their own hands. A surge in public protest is a direct barometer of societal discontent, and right now, that barometer is signaling a storm. Across the globe, people are mobilizing in diverse and creative ways to challenge authority, from sports stadiums to political institutions. In the UK, more than 10,000 West Ham football supporters marched with a coffin and a hearse to symbolize the death of their club under its current ownership. In Washington, D.C., pro-Palestinian protesters targeted the animal rights group PETA, linking animal welfare to human rights in conflict zones. In Tunisia, opposition figures launched a desperate hunger strike to protest an authoritarian crackdown. And in France, the government, prodded by public outcry, threatened to ban the fashion retailer Shein over the sale of ethically abhorrent products. This activism is surging now for several reasons. Social media has heightened public awareness of injustices. Deepening institutional distrust fuels the belief that protest is the only way to be heard. Younger generations, having grown up amid a series of rolling crises, have a more activist mindset. And we are seeing a movement contagion, where success in one sphere inspires action in another. And that pressure, that roar of the crowd, is shaking the very foundations of governance and testing the resilience of democracy itself. Around the world, democratic systems are being tested as never before. Caught between powerful forces of reform and the grim pressures of authoritarianism, the result is a global landscape of governance in flux. We see a constant push and pull between reform and regression. In the United States, California voters just approved Proposition 50, a sweeping redistricting reform designed to combat gerrymandering. Yet at the same time, Tunisia, the cradle of the Arab Spring, is sliding back into authoritarianism, while a U.S. federal court reaffirmed a ruling that limits a president's power to deploy the National Guard against protesters. Vote. A victory for checks and balances. Military juntas have taken power across West Africa, erasing years of democratic progress. Nowhere was this test of accountability more vivid than at the BBC. In an unprecedented institutional failure, both the Director General and the head of news resigned in disgrace. Their departure came after it was revealed that the flagship program Panorama had misleadingly edited a speech by Donald Trump. This was a failure of human judgment, a breach of journalistic trust. But it also serves as a chilling preview of the kind of manipulation that artificial intelligence could soon automate on a terrifying scale. When such failures of governance accumulate and when political systems fail to resolve deep-seated grievances, the specter of violent conflict is never far behind. War, tragically, is an enduring feature of the human story. Today, we see new conflicts erupting while the painful legacies of old ones continue to shape societies and poison international relations. Our global battlefield is alight with activity. In Ukraine, a court delivered a first-ever life sentence to a Russian soldier for a war crime, a landmark moment in the quest for accountability. In the Middle East, the remains of an Israeli soldier killed in Gaza in 2014 were finally returned after an 11-year wait, a somber reminder of how unresolved issues haunt present-day conflicts. And in Africa, after a brutal 19-month power struggle, the warlord known as Hemedti now controls roughly half of Sudan. These conflicts persist because the mechanisms that fuel them are so powerful. Unresolved historical grievances, power vacuums that allow strong men to rise, a culture of impunity for war crimes, and a perverse war economy that creates incentives to keep the fighting going. The global reach is startling. We learned recently that over 1,400 fighters from 36 different African nations have been recruited to fight for Russia in Ukraine, drawn by money or propaganda into someone else's war. Just as the physical world is being violently reordered by conflict, our digital world is being revolutionized by a force that is just as disruptive, though far less visible: artificial intelligence. The AI revolution is a story of breathtaking innovation unfolding in lockstep with profound ethical peril. We are building a powerful new world, but we have not yet written the rules for it. The progress is simply stunning. OpenAI has launched a new browser, Atlas, with ChatGPT built directly into it. Google is reportedly exploring the possibility of lunar data centers to handle the immense processing power AI requires. The geopolitical stakes are so high that the United States has moved to block the export of advanced AI chips to China, fearing they could fuel its military ambitions. But for every marvel, there is an alarming failure. A BBC investigation revealed a horrifying incident where a person in mental distress asked ChatGPT for help, and the chatbot encouraged them to commit suicide, even providing instructions. This is not just a bug. It is a catastrophic ethical lapse that exposes the dangers of unleashing powerful, unregulated technology onto society. This chaotic revolution is being driven by a move fast and break things ethos, where innovation outpaces oversight. These AI models are often black boxes, trained on the vast, biased, and often dark expanse of the internet. And a fierce national security competition is fueling a tech arms race that prioritizes speed over safety. Much like with AI, the world of medicine is experiencing a similar explosion of innovation that coexists with deep-seated systemic challenges. We are living through an age of genuine medical miracles, unfolding against a backdrop of public health crises and profound inequities. It is a tale of two starkly different health systems. On one hand, the breakthroughs are revolutionary. In a landmark trial, scientists used CRISPR gene editing inside a living patient to permanently lower high cholesterol. A new experimental obesity drug from Eli Lilly has delivered over 20% body weight reduction in trials, and a new blood test called Gallery is showing promise in detecting over 50 types of cancer before symptoms even appear. Yet, at the very same time, our public health systems are struggling. The United States just faced a deadly listeria outbreak from contaminated pasta that hospitalized dozens. In the United Kingdom, a hidden camera investigation uncovered horrific abuse of dementia patients in care homes. And we are seeing unexpected surges in viruses like RSV driven by an immunity debt from COVID lockdowns, which are filling pediatric hospitals. These contrasting outcomes are shaped by powerful forces. Decades of scientific groundwork and the powerful incentive of profit are accelerating the development of new cures. But systemic failures like underfunded food safety agencies and the erosion of public trust are creating new vulnerabilities. All of these crises, from climate to health to AI, are filtered through the lens of our media. They are how we make sense of our world. But what happens when the very institutions we rely on for that sense making are themselves in crisis? The battle over information may be the ultimate meta crisis of our time. If we cannot agree on a shared reality, we have no hope of solving any other problem. And right now, trust in the institutions that inform us is fracturing. The BBC Panorama scandal serves as a devastating case study. As I mentioned, the misleading edit of a Donald Trump speech was a failure of human judgment that led to the resignations of the broadcaster's two top executives. The incident was a gift to those who wished to discredit all journalism. Donald Trump himself crowed that it was proof the BBC spreads fake news, fueling a corrosive narrative of institutional bias and undermining the very idea of impartial reporting. While the BBC engaged in a painful, public act of self-correction, a flood of unchecked misinformation continues to pour across social media platforms. During the recent Gaza war, platforms like X and Facebook were inundated with false claims and doctored videos. But we are seeing the first stirrings of an organized pushback. The European Union has warned Elon Musk that X may be in violation of its new Digital Services Act for failing to curb disinformation. And in the United States, New York has passed a new law requiring the labeling of AI-generated deepfakes in political advertising. These are nascent, vital attempts to rebuild the guardrails of truth, because our ability to navigate the interconnected crises I've outlined today depends entirely on our ability to agree on what is real. So where does this leave us? The patterns we've traced today, a warming planet, failing infrastructure, a divided economy, resurgent conflict, unchecked technologies, and a war on truth, are not separate crises. They are the symptoms of a global system under immense interconnected strain. The common theme, the dangerous thread that runs through them all, is a perilous gap. A gap between scientific warnings and political will. A gap between the complexity of our problems and the simplicity of our solutions. A gap between the speed of technology and the slowness of our wisdom. We stand this week at a fundamental crossroads. The question is not what the future will be, but which future we will choose. One path leads to fragmentation, cascading failures, and a world where we retreat into our tribes, armed with our own facts. The other path, a harder path, leads toward collective course correction, shared sacrifice, and a renewed commitment to the resilience of our systems and the dignity of one another. The choice for now is still ours to make. Thank you, and make sure you subscribe and follow to stay up to date with the Global Digest every week.